Welcome to a Go-To Group presentation.
Thank you for coming to our JIRA administration training today. We're going to talk about the administrative functions within the JIRA projects. On the left-hand side of this screen, you'll see all of the administration functions that are available. We'll talk about creating projects, users, and talk in great detail about how to create new workflows. But by the end, we'll talk about all of these menu options. So let's look at creating projects within JIRA. As you know, all of your issues within JIRA are categorized by project. So once you click on the projects menu, you'll see the list of the projects within your JIRA system. As you can see, I currently have one JIRA project, but let's add another new project. Click on the Add Projects link, and here you type in the name of your new JIRA project. You can type in any name you want. Of course, you want it to be recognizable to all the users within your system. Next, you type in the project key. The project key is the unique identifier for your project. So as issues are created within your project, the issue ID looks something like this: key, dash, and then a sequential number. So you want to use, it has to be a unique identifier across all of your JIRA projects. And we recommend that typically you use a 2 to 3 letter uppercase key. So I will use my key called JIR. Here you can enter a URL that points to a web page, typically would be the documentation for your project. And next you assign a project lead to this project. A project lead is significant because when new issues are created, by default they're assigned to the project lead. You'll notice on the right side of the data entry box for project lead is what's called a user picker. If you click on that icon, you'll be able to see all of the users that have been created within your system. Select a particular user and that will be the project lead for this project. The next field is default assignee. You'll notice that it's already been pre-filled with whoever the project lead is. The reason this is an optional box and pre-filled for you is there's a configuration option within JIRA that allows you to create issues and without having to assign the issue to anyone like the project lead. That's an optional setting. By default, it's not turned on. Later in the class, we'll play with that setting. Next, you can enter a description for your project. And next are some other fields that we'll learn about later. One is a notification scheme. A notification scheme is a structure that's set that defines who is notified of issues, when issues are created, when they're updated, when they're deleted. You can specify individual users, groups of users, users within a particular role like a developer or a QA tester. So we'll look at this further later. Also, there's a permission scheme associated with each project. This permission scheme basically identifies who can do what, who can work on issues, who can close issues, who can delete issues, who can create issues, who can actually see your issues. So if you want, you could create a permission scheme so that only particular groups of people within your company can see particular issues. Further in the class, I'll talk more about creating custom permission schemes for your projects. Last of all is an issue security scheme. We'll also talk about that later in the class. So let's add my new project. Okay, so now this is an overview screen about my project. So as you can see, my key, JIR, the URL, who's the project lead, issue types, which we'll talk about very soon, notification schemes, permission schemes, issue security schemes. Briefly, issue security schemes are a way that particular issue types can only be seen within particular projects. For example, you might have a development project where your types of issues are bugs, features, and tasks, whereas you might have another project used to approve travel requests. So of course, the approved travel request issue type doesn't belong in a development project. So security schemes allow you to modify those settings. Field configuration schemes allow you to create different settings for fields within your project. Workflow schemes we'll talk about soon. And you can also allocate projects to categories. And we'll look at that shortly. Before I go on to that, I want to talk about the items on the bottom, components and versions. Within the JIRA project, you can create all of the issues and assign them just to that project, or if you would like, you can create components for a project. A project might have a database component, a front-end component, a back-end component. So if you want issues automatically assigned to the leads for each of these individual components, you can create those components. When a user creates an issue, they can assign what component it belongs to. Within JIRA, you can also create versions of your project. It helps you do releases. When you release, create a new release for your project, you can create a version and you can assign issues to a particular version. And it also keeps your backward history. It keeps track of what issues were fixed in previous versions. And finally, there's also a feature where it can print out the issues for a version, also known as release notes. So let's create a new component for this project. So here's my project. Let's type in the name of my component. Maybe it's a GUI component. In a description, the front end features of this project. And the real secret or usefulness of using components is that when I created a project, we entered in a team lead. And we said the significance of that team lead is who new issues are assigned to automatically. But if you create components, now you can come up with a component lead so that when someone creates an issue for a particular component, that issue is automatically assigned to the component lead instead of the project lead. So once again, clicking on the user browser and selecting a user ID, we've now assigned a component lead for this component. Notice that within components, you didn't have the other flexibility you have within projects. You don't have workflows. You don't have permission schemes. All of those are attached to a project, not to a component. Now, if you look at below components, you see the new component that I added called GUI. Okay, so that's basically all you need to do to create a project. Once you've created a project, users can now start creating issues against this project using the default workflow. The default workflow with JIRA is very similar to the Bugzilla workflow, and we'll talk about what that workflow looks like in a few minutes. But first, let's talk about project categories. If you'll click on the project category link, in my example, I've already created one category called a training category. Categories are useful if you have many projects. You might be a big company and you create 100 projects, 200 projects, and when you look at all the projects on your JIRA dashboard, it might be difficult to find the project you're interested in. So what you can do is you can categorize projects by category. So let's create a new category. And if you want, you could enter a description of the category. So now go back to the project that you just created by clicking on the Project tab, and then your project. And here at the bottom you see Project Category, Select Category. Click on that link, and now you can select what category your project belongs to. I'm selecting the category I just created, and I'll do a select. Now, if you'll go to your home screen, which in JIRA we call your dashboard, I see now my category, and below that JIRA project I just created. The nice thing about categories is you can hide them, so that if you have maybe a dozen categories with 200 projects, you'll only see the category you're most interested in. The hide, I'm hiding that project, and now maybe I'll open up that previous category. So you can see how categories can be useful in managing a large list of projects. Once again, categories, just like the components, are really not that powerful over this categorization. There's only one level of categorization currently, and you cannot create workflows, security schemes, permission schemes, etc. to categories of projects. All of this is going to change when JIRA 4.0 is released at the end of the year. Categories will be significantly enhanced. So those are projects and categories. So now let's go on to creating users and groups within JIRA.
This was a Go-To Group presentation. Thank you for watching.